Welcome to the podcast. My name is Rabbi Daniel Schonbuch. I'm a licensed psychotherapist and author of a new book called Viktor Frankl and the Psychology of the Soul. I'm really honored today to have with us our guest, Gedale Fenster, who is an entrepreneur, spiritual leader, somebody who's involved with helping addiction in the Evolve Center approach, as well as a spokesman for Breslov in Florida. So Gedale, thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast.
My pleasure.
Maybe just introduce yourself and tell us what you do and your work in therapy and spirituality, helping a lot of people over the years.
I think I was called a spiritual consultant. I'm not a rabbi, but I guess spiritual consultant's the right word. Basically, I own a treatment center. We own a dual diagnosis, detox, rehab, and treatment center. I've had that for the past 10 years. I also have a very popular podcast today that we do daily classes on mental health, spirituality, pretty much everything based on the teachings of Chassidus, of Rabbi Nachman, the Baal Shem Tov, the Baal Sulam, Chabad, pretty much everything. And we try to bring old wisdom to very practical knowledge and be able to bring people back to their roots and give them, a lot of coping strategies on how to deal with today's chaos.
Yeah, there's a lot of chaos going on, isn't there?
A lot of
And I believe that when chaos adds up, it ends up in addiction, doesn't it? At some point for many people. Have you found that in your work?
How do we cope with strategies? How do we cope with things today? Either, we're turning it up to our creator, or we're numbing it away. So definitely it's either, chaos I think Kabbalah speaks about the tohu energy, it's chaos energy that has potential for, breakthroughs, but it also has potential for breakdowns.
Yeah, and that breakdown adds up to addiction, doesn't it? And what are some of the addictions that you treat in your centers? What are you really dealing with at a daily level?
I mean, everything from alcohol to cocaine to, even mental health, depression, anxiety, any form of addiction. Mm-hmm. Any marijuana, any form of substance. Instead of looking for substance, people are looking for have other substance issues. Lack of substance in life, we end up with substance issues.
Correct. And what's the tikkun? What's the repair for lack of substance? What does a person do when it reminds me of the 12-step model, doesn't it? Are you based on the 12-step model as well?
Yes, we are. We are based on the 12-step model. A lot of it is, your teachings are really great, especially how you found Viktor Frankl and you brought the Rebbe into Viktor Frankl. I mean, when you find meaning in suffering, suffering goes away. So I often think that a lot of times addictions are often either rooted in lack of meaning or, like Viktor Frankl speaks about, or trauma, in not having a connection with your creator. So, I always think an addiction is a spiritual awakening. It's you're seeking a higher you're getting high. You're trying to get to a higher consciousness, but you're doing it with inappropriate ways where you're not earning the light.
That's exactly what Carl Jung said. Carl Jung was instrumental in founding Alcoholics Anonymous. And he said, spiritus contra spiritum. Spiritus, meaning spirituality, confronts the lack of the desire for alcohol. Spirit, in Latin, the word alcohol is spirit, and spirituality is also spirit. So he says the alcoholic, let's say the addict, is really seeking deep spiritual connection in the world, but they're terribly wounded. So they find a debased form. They find a numbing form of it. And it seems to be in your work, you're trying to find an accessible, real part of the spirituality, correct? Is that what you do?
Yeah, I mean, if you even his work and also David Hawkins's work, that talk about how, the quest for higher consciousness, what all drugs do and alcohol does is they kill the ego. So you feel great at that time. But what's making us feel miserable in the first place? Self-centeredness, ego, fear. If we realize that at the end of the day, if we go through it and we develop spiritually through prayer, through seeking meaning in our life, then we can tame the ego, and at least we don't have to. We're high already in life. Instead of doing it, through toxicity, connect through infinity.
So your message is for people that come into your centers, and your message on your podcast is for everybody around the world that's following you. What are they seeking from you? What are they seeking from you in your classes?
I think the classes have a good ability to deal with basically how to cope with things in life. Set goals at the same time. Also have we also deal with give yourself a lot of self-compassion. The majority of the podcast is to give people to give people the right awareness, to put them in the right consciousness, to live in a higher consciousness, so they can have a better relationship with their creator, and also have a better relationship with people. A lot of my message has to deal with, dismiss the messenger and focus on the message. A lot of times when we get stuck in life, we get stuck with, I think I came up with this DBT therapy.
I heard about it. Tell everybody what DBT stands for. And besides dialectical behavior therapy, from your perspective, what does it stand for?
It's first is dismiss the messenger. Dismiss the messenger that you think is causing you all this pain, right? And then B, believe it's for the best, and then thank God for it. So we get even in myself when we're going through things in life, the messenger is always we put all our energy into the messenger, and we don't get that breakthrough. And the biggest exile that according to the Baal Sulam teaches us that the greatest exile is that believing that God doesn't love you, and the greatest exile is believing that somebody else is exiling you but God. These two things it's a radical mind shift, and taking responsibility and believing that things can change, with changing the meaning of things, like you speak about. When you change the meaning, you change the feeling. And when we're able to have, we're looking into our purpose and looking into our tikkun, we realize that people in our lives, they come, they go, they teach us lessons, they go, but they're not the cause of it. It's really God doing all this.
Could you bring a real example of the DBT method? Maybe somebody you've helped recently? Could you give a...
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times in relationship, for example, a lot of relationships, we fall into codependencies. A person will say, well, that my husband ruined my life. That person cheated on me, 5 times. They ruined my life, right? People sometimes, to realize God tests you to realize you don't have your own boundaries. So because you had such fear of failure, or fear of somebody leaving you, or fear of being alone, you were able to put up with certain people that you should have put a boundary and left already. But because you were such an exile that you feel like you didn't deserve anything better, because let's say that person had a childhood where they had fear of abandonment. They end up dealing with toxic people, and they think that this is all I can get in life. And they'll put up with, unfortunately, the worst situations, and they'll put up with abusive relationships because they don't believe they can do better, or they don't believe they believe they deserve it. So without dismissing the messenger, to realize that person was there God sent that person in your life to heal your cure of being of abandonment issues. So God's always sending people in our lives to heal something.
Wow.
Yeah.
So there's a meaning in everything, then, isn't there?
Everything. That's the number one reason why I love Rabbi Nachman's teachings. We can pretty much assign a meaning to pretty much everything, even our spiritual lows and our spiritual, even when we don't feel like praying anymore. Everything. He really gives a meaning to everything. Every single Torah that he has, we can apply appropriate meaning to it. So then that changes how you feel about the situation.
So you're addicted. An addicted person comes into your clinic, the Evolve Treatment Centers. He comes to you, and he's been in bad relationships. He was abused as a child. He's overstressed at work. He's reaching out to numb himself. He's involved in smoking marijuana every day. He's drinking quite a bit after work. He starts gambling addictions, internet addictions, relationship addictions. So how do you start helping him? What's the first thing? He meets Gedale Fenster. What do you talk about with him? How do you start with people?
Obviously we have a whole team. We have a whole team of, first we usually detox the person.
Detox.
Yeah.
Stop taking the drug.
Yeah. And then
time alone without it.
Go through the craving process, go through the whole, and then we do a biopsychosocial on them. We do a psychoanalysis. We give them the proper diagnosis. We sometimes adjust the medication to see how he best fits. And then we go through an extensive therapeutic process, from residential treatment to partial hospitalization to intensive hospitalization. And then our goal is medication management. Our goal is also to integrate him back into society through getting a job, to getting a sponsor, etc.
Yeah. Viktor Frankl talked about some of the things you're mentioning that resets the person. It orients them towards something beyond themselves. And there's
Right.
several ways you go beyond yourself, according to Frankl. The first is what he called creative values. What are you creating with your life? Like, what are you doing with your life right now? Are you happy with what you're doing? Now, you and I have probably seen a lot of physicians, lawyers, and accountants. On the outside, look like they're living great lives, but inside they're terribly broken and end up with all types of addictions, right? So Frankl says you have to look in, you got to help people. Is this your calling? Is there a deeper calling than a lawyer, an accountant, or a physician? Maybe there's something else you want to do with your life. That's part one. Part two to find meaning is loving someone. Who can you love more authentically in this world? We all know people have difficulty in relationships. Even if your partner is imperfect, I'm not saying abusive, but imperfect, are you doing enough to love them? And when you really authentically love somebody, you're going to find meaning in the act of giving. And then he says, another way to find meaning is experiencing something. What have you not experienced yet? That could be a trip to Florida. It could be a trip to the Kotel. It could be a spiritual experience. It could be learning Chassidut. It could be something which is higher than yourself.
Right.
And he says the third level of finding meaning is when you're confronting inescapable suffering. There's nothing you could do. Just think about Viktor Frankl. He writes about this in Man's Search for Meaning, which most people, and I'm sure you've read it yourself. He's in Auschwitz. He's in Auschwitz. And he doesn't know if his wife has been killed. Perhaps he knew his parents had been murdered at the point. I'm not sure. But in spite of that, he decided he was going to find meaning in Auschwitz. That would have meant sharing a good word with somebody who was about to commit suicide so they wouldn't commit suicide. How would he help people not commit suicide? He'd say, do you have a task that you are thinking about fulfilling in the future? If they didn't, he'd help them think about that future task. So he says the ultimate in all freedoms is the ability to choose one's attitude towards a situation in spite of it. Now, I know you've also gone through your own personal difficulties. It's public knowledge. Can you talk about loss in your family and how you found meaning and so on?
I mean, I lost my son, I lost him at 15 years old. He was sick when he was 6. He had cancer. He came back. And there's no question that these teachings definitely helped me deal with the grieving and finding meaning and purpose. And again, what helped me a lot is realizing that some souls have certain missions in this world. Rabbi Nachman, he passed away at 38. He lost 4 children. There's a lot of his teachings speak about how his personal loss. So that helped me a lot. And realize that some souls have a certain amount of time in this world and their tikkun is up and their mission is up. So that helped me a lot to give it the appropriate meaning. I think wisdom is the memory without the emotion. So otherwise, when we don't elevate things with proper meaning, we end up with the negative emotion and we replay that movie over and over. So that's why it's so important that we have to give meaning as soon as possible, as much as we can, to things, any incident in our lives, and believe that God loves us and believe that everything's for the best. And that helped me go through the process of healing. But definitely, I went through grieving, feeling, and healing. I went through that process.
Mm-hmm. Is that the process a lot of addicts have to go through as well?
I mean, I think Edith Eger speaks about this. Grieving, feeling, and healing is usually the process that we have to go through. We have that broken heart, but at the end of the broken heart usually comes some kind of consolation. Rabbi Nachman has a lesson 65 on bittul. This concept called bittul, which is really pretty much exactly man's soul true meaning in a Hasidic way. He has a book called Garden of the Souls, which is basically, it takes that Torah and applies it. But he basically says that after any experience that we go through, if the experience is handled well, we end up with a new higher consciousness. We end up with an elevated consciousness after that experience. So if our attitude is the right attitude, and many times, again, our sages tell us that joy is the exit strategy for every situation. Then at the end of the day, we do end up in a much better place. For example, a person, an addict who comes to treatment, and if he handles his recovery well, he gets a spiritual awakening. That spiritual awakening is much greater than before he even had the addiction. So at the end of the day, everything really, really, the lowest, the low, it really prepares you for the high in life. And it goes across the board. It's just the fear. We have the fear. We have the fear of God forbid not working out. It's the fear which is rooted in the ego that's causing most of the damage today.
Mm-hmm. So this guy or this woman, by the way, they hit rock bottom. And what I think what you're saying is even right there, there's an opportunity within that rock bottomness, if that's a word, there's an opportunity to find something much greater. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and the rock bottom is actually the greatest place to be in because there's no more resistance. You're able to surrender. You're able to close your eyes. You've tried everything. As long as sometimes if you haven't hit rock bottom, you could still be in denial. You could still be blaming others. You could still be, resisting the situation. But when you hit rock bottom, you're almost to a point where you'll do anything. I remember my gambling addiction started at 21. It ended at 22. I relapsed many times gambling, but I was at a point of rock bottom, which I'll do anything. I'll try anything. But that's a place where you're so broken, but that's the place where the light comes in.
Can I ask you what got you to that gambling addiction in the first place?
I would say low self-esteem, having to prove to others that I had to make money to be significant.
Mm-hmm.
Not being raised by parents that had supported or not to the point. So I felt like I had to prove to everybody, and so I tried to make money quickly, and I crashed. And then now I did it through an authentic way.
You found meaning.
I found meaning. Correct.
But
from the problem comes, again, based on this whole concept, from the problem is the solution. At the end of the day, the problem is the solution. In the problem, there is a solution.
Can you elaborate? That's incredible.
In the addiction is a spiritual awakening.
In that moment of the problem, if you find meaning, that's the solution, you're saying?
That's the solution. That's the awakening.
That's what Frankl was saying too, right? That's what he said. Huh? That's what Frankl was saying too, by the way.
Did he say that too?
Solution, well, not in the same words, but I could paraphrase him. Yeah, in the problem it's begging to you. That moment in your life is begging to you to respond to it. He says responsibly. And when you do that, you find meaning in the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I could tell you how he got the download of these teachings. It's Chassidus 101. His teachings are Chassidus 101. That's why I'm sure the Lubavitcher Rebbe gave him such a strength for it. But it's Rabbi Nachman.
Well, the reason I believe the Lubavitcher Rebbe liked his works and promoted, and he said people should promote his work and seek out his work, because he was dealing with the generation of Sigmund Freud, who didn't believe in God. Right. The geist of most psychotherapy from Freud, probably till the 60s, was all about the self, the id, impulse, and so on. There's no spirituality. And the Rebbe believed that most answers do come from spirituality. And so he really promoted Frankl's ideas. Frankl was alone, you understand. Talk about finding meaning in a desert. Everybody was against Viktor Frankl. Right. The whole geist of psychology was all about the self. You know about self-psychology today. It just it's been the main theme in Western culture. Is all about the self. Yeah. And I write about in my book, man, Viktor Frankl's Psychology of the Soul. I have a map. I have like a pyramid I can show you. And that pyramid, the first 6 levels of the pyramid are just about the self, really. It's all about the self. It goes from your self-belief systems, your sensations, your thoughts, and so on. But that's levels 1 to 6, I say in the book. But levels 7, 8, and 9, and 10 are beyond the self. Those are things like values, things like meaningful experiences, spirituality, and God himself, to connect to God in a really profound way. So that's why the Rebbe was very pro this concept. He believed, and we do believe in Hasidic thought, that God is creating the world at every moment. So every moment is filled with God's direction towards you.
I find that sometimes, because a person many times he's had a bad religious experience, we need books like Viktor Frankl's books, and we need books like something in modern language to reconnect, but through a different language. And that's, many people have reconnected to the 12 steps through Viktor Frankl's teaching. Today you have to because the stigma is, their view of religion, their view of spirituality is completely flawed. So, but when you go back and you realize, wow, I didn't see it this way. So that's a lot what my classes do, is really change your perspective on how you're viewing things in the first place.
And you have to do that, don't you? You have to go to the ultimate of all human freedoms, because that third level is inescapable suffering. I'm assuming for the addict, they are feeling their situation's inescapable also, isn't it?
Yeah,
That's rock bottom.
yeah, the rock bottom is but at the end of the day, it's the greatest place because that's where they're connecting. That's where they're surrendering. Surrendering is finally, being able to remember the job of the ego is to block perspective. So the ego will do anything to not listen, to block any kind of truth, to always point the fault outside. So when you're surrendering, you stop resisting. And you're able to now say, okay, I have a problem, and God is close to those who call out to Him in truth. So when you're in that truth, that's where you get the help.
Me'amakim kirasika ka.
Okay, right?
You call it to God when you hit the bottom.
Yeah, but at the same time, God is also close to those who speak to Him in truth, and God is the light, and God is the salvation. So it's you have to get to the place of truth where I'm desperate. That's where the truth comes out.
Really true. It's interesting. In 2016, I ran 2 conferences in Viktor Frankl, and I brought a Rabbi Wallerstein there. So that's all.
Sure, man, it's all right.
And I brought him to speak about the Torah's perspective of addiction. I had no idea of his past. And I'll link this to the video below. You can watch Rabbi Wallerstein speak at the conference. And I'm waiting to hear about all the sources in the Torah about overcoming addiction and 12 steps. And he begins his lecture saying that he was a recovering addict. I don't know if you're aware of that, but he talked about that. I didn't know that until that moment. And his addiction was your addiction. He was a gambling addict.
Yeah. I heard about that.
He used to go to AC all the time. And he said there's no dopamine rush as close to the gambling dopamine. And I've been hearing lately in the communities that it's a very big growing problem right now, gambling addiction. It's exploding. They say there's a tremendously powerful rush that happens. He said that feeling of winning and then giving out money to people around him was just absolutely incredible. But this is what he said a few minutes later. He said that it was like going down a dead-end street over and over and over again. And I asked him, so what's the way out? He said the way out is building a bigger road, a super highway out of there. And the super highway was fulfilling some meaning in life.
Yeah.
And I think you're saying the same thing, isn't it? And you're going to what Viktor Frankl called absolute meaning or ultimate meaning. And I think the 12 steps is saying that as well.
Yeah, but the 12 steps really take you from, the purpose of 12 steps is really to take you from pain to purpose. Because you're going through pain, and then you're all of a sudden you're surrendering, you're believing in a higher God, and you're doing the inventory, you're taking responsibility for your life, but at the end of the time, you end up becoming a giver. So you're going from a taker to a giver. But at the end of the day, not only do you have to be a sponsor other people. So you can see how the goal is, hey, you are too into the receiving, now you're going to become a giver, which is the ultimate fulfillment of God's purpose, that we should emulate Him by giving.
And how did you make that switch? I want people to understand this, that you're one of us. You're your average person, right. You're a businessman, Baruch Hashem, you're doing well.
Rabbi Nachman's teachings, I realized that one of the areas that I had was my relationships with inappropriate women. And that led to a lot of receiving energy, which I didn't know back then how that had such an effect on sadness, because that causes a lot of sadness. So when a person has sexual issues and he's in receiving energy, it's going to lead to sadness, pretty much like anything else. And anytime we're sad, we're going to look for an escape. So the escape could be gambling. But at the end of the day, if you fix the sadness by taking responsibility and by fixing being in the right role, in the right masculine energy, you don't need to chase anything. You attract things in your life. And then that leads you to, once you feel good about yourself, you'll start doing more for you, you'll seek higher and higher meaning, et cetera, and growing. But a lot of this is an escape to sadness. So Rabbi Nachman says that, people today, there's a lot of challenges with money, and they get depressed with money, and they fall into sexual blemishes. And they could be addicted to a lot of sexual blemishes because of sadness, because we don't have a good relationship with money. And then all of a sudden we get, we get rejected, and then it just becomes a vicious pattern. Mm-hmm. But all from Rabbi Nachman's teachings. I can be honest with you, nothing else helped me as much as his teachings. Understand sadness, understand why I'm sad, really dealt with the sadness itself. which I think that is such an emphasis today.
The core of the addiction, you're saying, one of the negative self-beliefs and feelings is the sadness, you're saying.
Yeah, because what happens is not
yeah.
the sin itself is not the problem, it's the reaction to the sin.
Mm.
What we do when we sin. If we just sinned and we all of a sudden we got up strong, then at the end of the day we would be okay. But it's because of the reaction to the sin. You know, all these sins that they leave a residue, they leave a klipa. They block, you know, they make you think that God doesn't love you. They make you think that things are never going to get better. They make you focus on desperation. So what happens? You crash, and then you know you're looking for the first escape, whether it be gambling, whether it be drugs, whether it be you know whatever kind of sexual blemishes, pornography. It's all just a quick hit of dopamine, and then you crash.
So somebody comes to your clinic for all these types of addictions. I mean, uniquely the way you've built this organization, your companies and so on, at some point, will they encounter Rabbi Nachman's teachings in your clinics?
It depends. With Jewish clients, I'm a little bit different. But on my podcast, I also consult with people. I'm dealing with a lot of guys with pornography addictions. And what I'll do is I'll be able to diagnose what's happening. What they think the problem is not really the problem. You get me? So it's usually many guys are in the wrong energy. They're in a very feminine energy. They're in the receiving energy. Or and then without fixing the sexual blemish, which is the yesod in Kabbalah, it's very hard to grasp anything. So that's really an area that I hit hard in, and I've been able to be very successful in getting people to stop masturbating and stop watching porn, because you're not thinking straight. You're not when you have those two addictions, it just blocks everything. And usually, everybody that has the other addictions ends up with this one too.
Yeah, let me just share with you from my book what I'm referring to before. So this is in the introduction. I have a kind of like concept of how a human being works. And I've very much influenced as a therapist with cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. So if you look at the first 6 levels, they're like what most therapy deals with. So behaviors and sensations. And I look at it as a pyramid because they come from things above them. So emotions cause sensations. If your heart is racing, you're probably scared.
Right.
And where do emotions come from? Emotions come from thoughts. If I'm thinking bad thoughts, I have bad emotions. That's Chabad Chagas Nehi, right? That's Chabad.
Exactly.
But in CBT, where do thoughts come from? They come from what we call these habitual thinking patterns. So what causes thoughts? So I've been habitualized to overestimating danger, negative filtering, looking for negative in myself and others, catastrophizing, labeling myself, overgeneralizing. That's basic CBT. Where do thinking patterns come from? They come from beliefs. So if I believe I'm either, in CBT, we have 3 negative core beliefs, which are underneath most depression, anxiety, and addiction. I'm worthless, I'm powerless, or I'm unlovable. Those are the 3 core negative emotions. So if you have a negative belief that you're worthless, you tend to be somebody who has a lot of thinking patterns like negative filtering. And then you think bad thoughts about yourself, and then you feel depressed, and then you eat food all day or something, eat chocolate all day. Now, where do beliefs come from? They come from our identity or personality. They come from either our childhood, how we were raised, either loving parents or neglectful or abusive parents and so on. Or they come from, traumas in our life. So these first 6 levels, let me connect them to what you said, is they are the non-masculine energy, let's say. They're all about the receiving of my thoughts, receiving of experience, and so on. What Frankl is talking about, I delineate very carefully, is level 7 to 10, is beyond the self, meaning values, spirituality, and God himself. Now, what's really important is most of psychotherapy goes right here. It stops here. You go to most psychotherapists, they're going to stop right here. They're not going to go towards higher levels because, for many reasons, Sigmund Freud, the secular world that we've grown up in the last 100 years and so on, they're not trained in these worlds. But according to Frankl, all healing only happens beyond the self. So this is connecting to what you're saying. This, I believe, is what you're referring to as a masculine energy, isn't it?
Just finding, correct.
Yeah, go ahead.
Being exactly.
Going out and fulfilling a meaning is a more masculine. We're not talking about male, female. We're talking about masculine, zachar.
Exactly.
Being a mashpia. A woman could have a masculine power as well, correct? Yeah.
Correct.
Looking for value. What's valuable? I ask people, I have in my book a 30-day logotherapy workbook at the end. Before they do the 30 days of journaling levels of meaning, I ask them to pick values. Are their values authenticity? Are their values loving kindness? Are their values being a good citizen? You know, picking values, which means you have something timeless that you attach yourself to beyond yourself. Spirituality, connection with God and God himself, thinking yourself as a chelek elokam mamash. What a tremendous hisbonenus, a tremendous meditation that a person just contemplates, I'm created by Hashem and he loves me. What a wonderful, elation a person would get from such a thought. But is that correct? Are these what we call more masculine
Absolutely.
things?
It's great how you put this in a chart, by the way, because we think we have to, sometimes you have to go above, like you have to go above. Like the reason why we're so stuck in ourselves is like, for example, like they speak about, there's a study that showed that people who are depressed, they told them to go volunteer, go volunteer, get out of your head. And it ended up helping. But taking some kind of action above yourselves and seeking meaning, seeking purpose in your life. And it usually healed a lot of people. Basically, the problem is really, really, a lot of the problems are coming from our self-centeredness and our problems and our situations, etc. Once we get outside of ourselves, it usually does the trick, I find.
Really true. And what I'm claiming is like this. You could make a tikkun from a lower level. If your problem, let's say, is minor depression, minor anxiety, little internet use, let's say, not the heavy stuff. So you could rectify this maybe here. But the deeper the problem is, the lower you go, the higher you have to reach. And that's what Viktor Frankl said. I'm sure you understand the similarity with Chassidut, what you're saying. The lower you get, the higher you have to reach.
It's funny because Rabbi Nachman says this. He says the bigger the sickness, the bigger the doctor you need.
The deeper the problem, the higher you have to reach upwards.
The bigger the sickness, the greater. Like for example, God forbid, a person has a real sickness. He can't go to a regular pediatric doctor. He has to go to a specialist.
You have to go to a specialist.
Yeah, like the greater the sickness, God forbid, the greater the doctor you need. Like the higher you have to go. Correctly, exactly what we're saying here.
And each level, and that's why I put it on this chart, because I want to show people as follows. If you make a tikkun, let's say in a level 4, if you change a thinking pattern, it will cascade to your thinking, your thoughts, your emotions, and behaviors. The higher you go, the more influential it is psychologically below as well. So if you look at the chart, you'll see that I can make a tikkun through just connecting through spirituality or God himself, which will cascade down to the lower levels. And I think this fits in the 12 steps models perfectly. It's all about, the first few steps are all about the powerlessness that I'm in, the bittul that we talked about before, and then knowing that you need something greater than yourself to get you out of your situation and so on. So a person can, we can learn a lot from addiction. We're really right there with humanity with addiction, because we could see that people that go to that level need something so high and so powerful. And there's also something to learn for everybody else also. It's not just the addict that needs it. We're all addicts if we think about it. We're all not on the level of meaning and spirituality we should be. But when we go to that level, we can make a tikkun in all levels below as well.
Beautiful. It's beautiful. This chart is great. You're mapping it out, which is great. Because again, we always think we have to this has to work out for me to get better. This situation, this relationship has to work out. This money situation has to work out. But it's not, in the Kabbalah says the opposite. It's when you change your state, conditions will change. But if you're going to a regular regular therapist, he's always into this will help you change the conditions. So when you change your state, it's almost defining logic, going above your head, going above, that you can handle the things below.
Where do you start? Somebody wants to start the healing process from addiction, depression, whatever they're going through. Is there a teaching of Rabbi Nachman you suggest they read? Where does somebody begin this process of healing?
I usually get them to go on the podcast, because what I've done is I've really transcended so much information. And it's a 20 to 30 minute class a day. And it's not just one class that's going to help them. It's repetitive knowledge, changing their perspective. So my classes are like therapy, Torah, Chassidus, everything. Where would they start? You could start by, Garden of Faith, but there's so much, it really it's rooted. It's the new actions of I'm going to wake up. I need to learn 30 minutes a day. I need to learn 20 minutes a day. It's not like it's the new identity where the person says I'm going to learn 20 minutes of behavioral change, some kind of spirituality 20 minutes a day. That's when I see the changing in people.
This is happening in your podcast.
My podcast, I think we have today tens of 20, 30,000, 40,000 people listen to it daily. And it's been growing and growing and growing. And it seems to work. And people really depend upon it. They depend and think God gives me the strength to be the channel for this light. But it's definitely rooted in high warmth, high expectations, changing meaning, getting out of self-centeredness. Thank God it's done really well.
And you see people's lives are changing, don't you?
Absolutely. I wouldn't do this for nothing. Absolutely. I know it changed because it changed my life. And I know I have a lot of intuition on what works and what doesn't work.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very grateful to be in the spot.
Beautiful. You access that energy, the transforming energy.
I've done many classes on your book. I've done many classes on thinking. It's a great book. A lot of tools in there.
I'm so honored, and I hope you can utilize my new book, Viktor Frankl and the Psychology of the Soul. I feel that it kind of like organizes what I've been thinking about and you've been thinking about for years, and kind of it systematizes it. And I take the reader through that journey from self to beyond the self. And then at the end of the book, I have them journal for 30 days. See, I believe, as did Frankl believe, that a lot of depression, anxiety is really we call neurological. Nuos means the lack of spirituality in their lives. He predicted that 20% of all depressive disorders are based upon the lack of spirituality. I think the percentages have changed. I would say 50 to 60% today. And we could see that with the addicted and so on. And he believed that if you just focus on meaning, you'll rectify a lot of other things in your life. So I take readers on a 30-day journaling, process. They read a stanza from Viktor Frankl. They could also read a stanza from Rabbi Nachman every day. I have them pick 3 values that they're trying to fulfill. Ask them if they fulfilled something meaningful today. I've asked them if there's any values they need to change or they have to change their attitudes. And I have them do that for 30 days. And before they do that, I have them measure the levels of meaning, levels of depression, anxiety. My prediction is after 30 days of just thinking about meaning every day, or going into your podcast 20 minutes every day, I predict that depression and anxiety will go down, your addictions will go down, and the resource is right in front of you. It's just finding meaning in life.
Right. I mean, because at the end of the day, you're strengthening yourself. So when you believe that, you can handle these problems, instead of you get anxious, you get excited. So it's not like the anxiety, the problem goes away, but you're dealing with it through growth, not through threat. So it becomes a challenge of we're accepting life as we're growing through life, not going through life.